If COVID never happened, what all would have you done in on past 4 months? I would have taken a kick-ass trip to Japan, which would have been way outside of my budget. Take my Vietnamese girlfriend to Vietnam for 2 weeks. She hasn't been there since she was 5 years old, and proposed to her. Thanks COVID. PS I proposed here in the States anyway. She said yes. Honestly, I'd probably just find something else to complain about. As terrible as it sounds, I'm low-key glad COVID happened. Glad isn't the right word, but the silver lining of it is that it has made me realize a lot. One of that being loneliness. That I'm not as much of a homebody as I thought I was. That things could be a lot worse. We're finally starting back our in-person play in 2 weeks and I'm super excited. Thankfully we just have a small party of 4 and a big space to play in. I have missed D&D for a while now. Same, we are about to start up our 4-person party again and it has been a couple months and we are all scheming and planning the entire time. Oh absolutely, the scheming has been happening over time. We actually finished a 3-year IRL time campaign in May of 2019 and we all hit level 20, so it has been over a year since we have played as a group. We have been doing other games from time to time, e.g. Monster of the Week, but it will be so nice to play D&D as a group once again. Our new campaign is set in the same homebrew world, 20 years in the future. I hear you. I've been independent from my parents for years now, but this was going to be the year I finally felt like an adult. I was under contract to buy my first house when I got laid off and the mortgage fell through. I was just starting to feel like I had my shit together. The year before I had made more money than any previous by a long shot and had no reason to think it wouldn't continue to be good. I would have been working. I would have been buying stuff for my new house. I had a trip to Europe planned for May. I had no idea how much I was taking for granted. Now I just sit on my ass in my overcrowded apartment and collect unemployment. It pays the bills, but I was so hyped to thrive financially instead of just making do. I just graduated college in May with a degree that relates to business within the entertainment industry. I had to move back home with my parents in another state just because the jobs weren't in the city I was in all of the sudden. It really sucks. I've applied to what I can just about every day, but the jobs just aren't there. I was ready to move on with my life and really be an adult, have a job, get married, have a dog in the backyard, all that jazz, but now it's on hold while I go back to sharing a bathroom with my siblings like in elementary school. It really sucks. I would be working a part-time job in a failing weed shop which probably would have been shut down by now. Instead, I'm now the manager, have fixed nearly 100 issues I inherited from the previous manager, store sales have improved greatly, and I suddenly have a career. All thanks to the global pandemic. Yay. Edit. Holy hell, this escalated quick. I'll do my best to answer these questions during my downtime between customers. Edit 2. Location, Canada. How I became manager. COVID-19 hits and I am the first of the 4 workers to be laid off, during the morning of what I then expected to be my last shift. 1 week later. The original manager has children, so when everything was shut down the owner laid her off so she could apply for CERB, take care of her kids, and lose very little income. Assistant manager, now set to take over the store after cannabis is deemed essential, doesn't know or didn't care about CERB, makes a fuss about being laid off, and has not taken his training seriously. I receive a call from the owner asking if I would be willing to come back to work as he no longer trusts the AM to not do anything stupid. The next morning I am informed that AM has been laid off, and going forward I will be the acting manager. The dispensaries here in CO have been killing it during this time. Every time I go to one I'm waiting a good bit, and I shop at a few stores around town. One of the buttenders at one of the shops said she's never made more in tips ever. I would not be alive. I was planning to commit suicide. I would have been dead before the lockdown, but when everything shut down I had met someone and I immediately felt comfortable around them, and I was able to vent and release years of bottled up emotions, and she helped me work through things one at a time, which started giving me hope that maybe I'm worth something. For me the COVID thing brought stuff to a head and I got hospitalized in a mental health unit. Ended up moving back in with my parents. I had been basically squatting in a house with a hole in the roof, intermittent work, mentally unwell, no running water, no heat for years, and then the ceiling collapsed. I'd been too afraid to tell my parents how we were living because they can be unpredictable and I wasn't living up to my standards. To my surprise they were really awesome, are seriously helping me out, and are buying us a house. Things are still hard but I think they're getting better. Before COVID hit, I accepted a job across the country being a rock climbing instructor for a Boy Scout camp. I put in my notice, moved in with my BF's family for the few weeks leading up to moving to the camp. Everything fell through. Lost the old job and the new one never started. Moved out of the house I was renting. Drained my savings in the move and subsequent months. Now I've started IT courses online, realized I love tech, and fixing tech, lost 20 pounds, and my BF and I are planning to start living on the road full-time, RV life. Life has never gone the way I planned. Not once, but I'm kind of happy with what I'm aiming for now. I would have some of the vision that I lost, because I spent months trying to find a neuro-ophthalmologist that would see me after I started going blind. That would be cool. But now I get to learn some interesting new skills like, find a new career that can be done when legally blind, and, don't walk into things that you can't see. It's an adventure. Well, that just gave me a healthy dose of perspective on rereading before posting. That wasn't a vision joke, but I'm leaving it because you seem like you'll appreciate it, as my reply was going to be, I'd have had my stoma reversal surgery and so wouldn't still have an inch of colon hanging out the side of my stomach shitting into a bag. But this is still temporary for me, whereas yours sounds pretty permanent and like it sucks. But you seem to have kept some humor, and I suspect that's a pretty hard thing to have done, so kudos. This was supposed to be the year of big positive life changes for me. I graduated with my MFA in theatre, which would have happened in person, and I would have gotten to see my family and celebrate with my cohort in person. I would have been a bridesmaid in one of my best friend's wedding. I also haven't seen her in person since 2018, so that would have been nice to see her. The first full production of one of my plays would have gone up in NYC. I would have had my own wedding. We got legally married last year, but still haven't had our wedding. Now we won't until probably 2022, at which point it's more like a vow renewal. My husband and I would have moved out of this damn studio to a place with a bigger kitchen and more space for our kitty to run around, but now we're stuck here for another year. I probably would have been able to get a job as a theater administrator or teacher and wouldn't feel like a useless couch lump, so yeah, this year can go to hell. I'm ready for 2021, and it better be better than this. The bar isn't that high. Was supposed to get married May 22nd and then head to Italy for the honeymoon a few days later. Push the wedding back to 10 halves, thinking, no way we would be in the same situation in 4.5 months. Well, I live in CA and I think you all know that is far from the case. Still planning on getting married 10 halves, but it will be in my parents' backyard and will be very small. Already made all our payments for the big celebrations, so that will still be happening at the venue in May-June 2021, with the honeymoon to follow mid-June. There is no mandate yet that says we cannot have a large gathering on 10 halves, but we are moving it so that our at-risk relatives can attend. All my grandparents are gone, but she has all hers, and it would be a death sentence if they got COVID. Best part is that since there is no mandate at this time, the venue is saying per their contract we need to pay them $2,500 to reschedule for next year. Safe to say that everyone we tell this to is completely shocked they would ask for more money given the situation. We are fighting it but anticipate that we will have to pay it. If that happens, I am very much looking forward to writing them a review. Family and friends have already said they will do the same. Probably wouldn't have lost my best friend. It's like I barely know them anymore, and it makes me wonder if we were really best friends, in person. I think yes. But I never get reached out to, nor do they reciprocate anything when I try to text them or show that I really care for them. It's so confusing. They leave for college tomorrow anyways, I have to wait another month, so in my head I guess we're not really anything anymore. I'm tired of reaching out first all the time like I'm playing Minesweeper, and with them meeting new people, I highly doubt they'll reach out. In the end, it was nice when I felt like I finally found someone who gets me and everything, and vice versa, but then 2 months into the pandemic and boom, it's like whole other person. And to think at one point we were planning on going to Spain for a senior trip together, LMAO, loudly crying. I most likely would have continued to stay overweight, as I had much easier access to eating out and would use school as an excuse to not work out. With the COVID quarantine, the boredom actually led me to work out a lot more, which also led me to eating better, and I am happy to say I've lost 14 pounds from when I first started this 3 months ago. Here is a list of things me and wife did do. You'll see why. We got married in a backyard Airbnb with our moms. It was what we wanted from the beginning. But in the whole wedding process it had blown up to become a dream wedding complete with prime rib. Something I could have never have afforded had it not been presented to me in such a lovely fashion. Long story short, 30k wedding for under 12k because of a surprise win at the venue, which was a ploy to get the rental for free but only if you use their vendors. I quit my job of 10 years to take a chance on a new job. I put in notice on March 2nd. I left March 19th. My state lockdown happens the next day. March 23rd I'm informed my new position is on hold till crisis is over. So, I've become a bonsai and raised bed garden enthusiast. In the middle of summer. In Phoenix. Yeah, I went to college. So, my wife has worked from home since COVID. She loves working from home. But hates that I'm home all day. So I should get a job, right? But I shouldn't. Among all of this, I know the day I left my work because it was March 17th when my fiancée at the time told me she was pregnant. I'm having a baby and I just quit my job. Great. I can't get a job because I'm here taking care of her. And the house. And the dogs. And tortoises. What job should I get now? Majority of easy jobs to get a frontline. Not risking my health or my family's. Work from home. 900 SQFT 2BDRM apartment. Two people can't work from home in the same space we have right now. So we need a new place. Time to house hunt during a pandemic, so we bought a house. My wife has never set foot in her future home and I've only been in it once for about 2 minutes. Yes, I did enough research, it is good. Killer deal. We move in 3 weeks. Ugh, not to mention all the lost money from buying the suits. The dresses. The flowers. They were all practically fully paid for since the wedding was April 5th. Less than 2 weeks away. We were able to get about 40 refunded. Most wouldn't budge because it was us choosing to change our date, so they would apply it to the new date but no refund, no tie. Don't need to have a 12K first birthday for our new baby. They really suggested that. I'm not mad, truthfully. Impressed as a human, but as a customer was not something I wanted to hear the day after the cancelled wedding. So let's recap. During this pandemic I have planned and cancelled a wedding. Left a job for a new job that has been put on hold. Bought a house my wife has never seen in person. Listened to my son's heartbeat for the first time on Facebook Messenger. That last one I'll never be able to replace. What mystery was never solved? DB Cooper. My theory is he faked his jump from that plane, and was still on board hidden somewhere when it landed. It's generally accepted that he worked in aviation, or was very familiar with aircraft. He knew to choose a flight operating the Boeing 727, which was one of the only aircraft of its type with an aft airstair door, and also how to unlock the door and lower the airstair mid-flight, something that even the cabin crew were not trained to do. Jumping out over a remote area, within the benefit of a predetermined drop point, or being in contact with someone on the ground, which wouldn't have been possible in 1971, would have been suicidal. Even if he'd survived the drop and landed safely, he'd likely have died of exposure or hypothermia unless he was picked up or reached shelter soon. My theory is, Cooper locks the flight crew in the cockpit, then opens the aft door, throws out 2 parachutes and a small portion of the ransom money to make it look like he jumped. He then uses a maintenance access panel to access the cargo bay or landing gear area. Prior to takeoff from SeaTac, he advises the pilot to remain at 10,000 feet with the flaps extended and the landing gear down, and waits there until they land in Reno. FBI sweep the cabin and confirm he's gone, but I'll bet they never check the cargo bay or landing gear. Cooper then waits for the confusion to die down and walks away with his money in hand, wearing the uniform of a cop or airport ground crew, which he either changed into or had hidden under his suit all along. Realizing that the bills were marked and that he could never deposit them or spend them without attracting attention, Cooper either destroyed them or hid them somewhere and waited for the heat to die down, which hasn't really ever happened, going back to his normal life instead. It's the only explanation that ticks all the boxes for me based on the facts that we do know. If it was a hijacking, why were there no radio calls, no demands, no squawk code for hijack, and no attempts to land the plane? Likewise, if it was an emergency, why didn't they descend and try for a landing? The plane was under positive control, and at least during the first turn where the pilot deviated off course, the autopilot had to have been disengaged since the angle of the turn exceeded the autopilot's capability. They overflew the Malaysian peninsula again and had ample opportunity to attempt a landing. Then there's the transponder, which was turned off at the precise moment the pilot transitioned between Malaysian and Vietnamese airspace. I mean literally seconds after the handoff, and then the plane started deviating back towards Malaysian airspace. If it was an emergency, it would have had to happen the very second after the pilot's last radio call. If the transponder was malfunctioning, they could have used the SATCOM to communicate, which we know was operational for several hours and receiving messages, but they went ignored. All the facts taken together spell out really only one conclusion, that the pilot wanted to disappear. The only mystery to me, I guess, is that the pilot didn't really raise any red flags mental health-wise. He had a pretty stellar record and was thought highly of, but it's a lot easier to believe someone who was struggling hid their suicidal thoughts than it is to believe any of the conspiracies. And as for why they didn't find the plane, they were searching a patch of ocean the size of Australia for a single 777. I'd be more surprised if they did find the crash site. It's quite literally a needle in a haystack. For what it's worth, they predicted based on ocean currents that debris would wash up in Madagascar and Eastern Africa, and they turned out to be exactly right. The Zodiac killer was never found, to my knowledge. Even though he was proven innocent, I still think it was Arthur Lee McCallan. The same day as the Lake Berryessa stabbings, he came home with a bloody knife as he was hunting chickens. He had a waterproof watch with the famous Zodiac symbol, and keep in mind that waterproof watches were extremely rare in the 1960s, so he couldn't have just got it anywhere. His footsteps at the Lake Berryessa stabbings, a size 10.5, matched perfectly with shoe size. His friend even testified to the fact that he heard McCallan mentioning about becoming a Zodiac. And lastly, the one survivor of the Lake Berryessa stabbing pointed out that McCallan looked exactly like the man that stabbed him and his girlfriend. The only reason he was proven innocent is because his fingerprints did not match those of the envelopes of the many letters he sent. Honestly, it could have been very easy to overcome this if all he had to do was make someone else write it. There are theories that the Unabomber was the Zodiac, but I still believe that it was Arthur Lee McCallan. Either way, he still got proven guilty for molesting Jean Bennett Ramsey, faked her own death, obviously, and is now the head of the globalist cabal that runs everything. Or that's what I tell my dad. He's a big conspiracy theorist. I ask for proof and he laughs at me. They're not gonna leave proof, so I changed tactics and wholeheartedly agree with him, but add my own even more ridiculous spins to the story, like that Jean Bennett Ramsey is the head of the Illuminati. My dad, why do you think Jean Bennett Ramsey is part of the Illuminati? Me, oh, God, they really got to you, didn't they? You just bought what she wanted you to believe. Wake up. There were recent advances in research on this topic within the last approximately 5 years or so. Fuzzy memory. Aside from the obvious answer, you sleep because you're tired, sleeping actually increases certain vascular pathways within the brain that helps flush out excess neurotransmitters, byproducts that would otherwise cause harmful buildup if left unchecked, aka toxic gunk. The reason why you eventually go insane and die from sleep deprivation is that these pathways can become blocked and clogged with this excess junk and inhibit neural communications and nutrient flow. Brain cells produce more harmful buildup, can't get nourishment, die, cause you to lose your marbles, and then you die. Take a nap, it won't kill ya. Disappearance of the Beaumont children in 1966 in South Australia. 3 kids were playing at the beach and never came home. Multiple witnesses saw them playing with a mid-30s male suspect, who possibly gained their trust over time. It's crazy how many people saw this man, and he was never found, and neither were the children. Their mother died last year in her 90s, never knowing what happened to her children, and their father is alive and in his 90s as well now. Oak Island. Who the hell actually wants to watch some show where they dig a hole for like 7 years? Maybe if it was like digging to the mantle, I'd watch that shit. Leave the treasure hunting to Nick Cage. My father still records every episode so he can watch it on his own time, and I'm just thinking, why? What have they honestly found that was notable in 7 years? That's the whole point, honestly. I love it. They never find anything and seems like they almost intentionally don't use modern technology because that would solve the mystery too quickly. They intentionally refer to the things they find in vague ways like, oh, this is original, or, it's the chapel vault, and if you haven't watched the show you're like, OMG, Templars built that shit in the 1200s. I honestly believe 1, there is no treasure and never was one, or 2, some dudes saw pirates or somebody else bury the treasure and then immediately dug it up when they left. There is no way Templars sailed to America and built a 200-foot booby-trapped shaft. I just love the progression of it. I honestly don't know if they are full of shit or not. I think I'd prefer it if History Channel was paying for them to dig all this shit up. I'd feel kind of bad if they were sinking a personal fortune into this and then being like, OMG, these rocks kind of make a cross if you look at them just right. Templars, your theory about them being paid to dig shit up is probably right. The thing I don't like about the show though, is the fact that they do so good advertising each episode and talking about what they might find or do find, then you watch the episode and all they found was a small rock or something. Every episode I've ever watched of it also ends on a cliffhanger and then they take half of the next episode to finish the cliffhanger. The fate of the Roanoke colony, for those unfamiliar, it was one of the first settlements on one of the barrier islands of the Outer Banks of what is now North Carolina. A little over 100 people had established it from England in the spot where a previous colony had been abandoned. It was pretty much doomed from the start, since there was a fair amount of harassment from the native population, including one death within days of arrival, and I think some interest from nearby Spaniards in taking it over. I may be misremembering that, I dunno, it's been literal decades since I took that history class, but despite all this, it lasted a few years. When the governor of the colony had to leave it for some reason or another, like I said, literal decades, he came back to find it abandoned save for the word CROATOAN carved into the fence post of the gate and the word crow into a nearby tree. The governor and the group he was with had hoped to confirm the colony's need to flee to the nearby native tribe, but a hurricane put a stop to their expedition and they returned to England. Ray Rivera, he went missing for 8 days until a hole was found on the roof of a building one day. When the hole was investigated, they found Ray's body himself. It's theorized he must have jumped off the neighbor hotel's rooftop, but there are a bunch of holes, pun slightly intended, regarding that theory. No one staying those nights Ray was gone heard any screams or a crash. The hole was pretty far away from any close part of the rooftop of the hotel. Not only his glasses were intact, but his cell phone was in one piece. Ken Rex McElroy raped, shot, robbed, intimidated and assaulted multiple people, but failed to catch a conviction. Everyone in their small town got sick of him after he shot a store owner. He was shot twice from 2 different firearms. 30 to 46 people witnessed the shooting. No one called an ambulance. The killers have not been caught. Tunguska event, speculation and theory, but no conclusive proof as to what it was. Most likely a meteorite airburst. It wasn't the first or the last time an event like that has happened. In ancient China, a massive explosion happened near a gunpowder storage building and killed thousands of people, including the only heir to the throne, paving the way for the collapse of the current dynasty. But there was no way that it was the gunpowder that went off, since the force of the explosion was equal to several Hiroshima bombings and there wasn't nearly enough gunpowder. And in 2013, there was an airburst that blew out windows, collapsed roofs, and lit up the sky in Russia. Neither of those events were as powerful as Tunguska though. I imagine if that meteorite had made it to the ground intact, it would have set off a global winter. The mystery of D.B. Cooper that happened in the 70s. He got on a plane with a fake bomb and demanded $200K in ransom money and a parachute. When the pilot landed the plane, they gave him the money and the parachute and he demanded the pilot take off again. During this second flight, he jumped off the plane with the money and the parachute, never to be seen again. To this day no one knows who he was or where he went. The toxic lady in California. There's a lady that had cancer of some sort, so when the doctors went to examine her, she body had a weird smell to it, almost like a garlic-like smell. When the doctors do a blood test, the blood has those weird crystals in them with another weird smell to it. The doctors and nurses in the room start getting nauseous, some of them even went unconscious. In the most severe case, one of the nurses got necrosis from the lady. Theories include conversion disorder, which has to do with the brain and the power of belief. Another has to do with dimethyl-sulfide, which is a powerful nerve agent that has been used in chemical warfare. One more theory is that there is a secret meth lab in the hospital. How Trump won the election. This is actually pretty well understood now. There is always a chunk of people in every election that likes neither candidate, but votes for one regardless. In 2016, that group of people was largely undecided, until the Comey letter. They then broke for Trump 2-1, which was enough to squeak him over the line in the 3 states where those folks had the most potential for impact. This time around, that chunk of the voter base is considerably smaller. People have largely made their minds up. That's why the polls are different this time. For those of you who have been to prison, jail, what is it like? 50 days in Macomb County Jail. Mount Clemens, me. Cold. Boring. Smells like bleach and feet. The worst part was hearing a guy screaming for the deputies because his chest hurt. They ignored him. He had a heart attack, and died a few feet from me. It's not quite traditional jail and doesn't last quite as long, but I found it far worse. I was arrested back in the mid-80s in my youth, living in the former Soviet Union in Eastern Europe, and served 8 hours in the farm pit. Basically just a concrete pit at a factory farm that's empty when you go in, but then they shovel in pig shit as the pigs produce it. I thought I was getting off light with a one-day punishment, but honestly it's been almost 45 years and I'm still a wee bit traumatized from it and still feel some anxiety when I see a pig farm, even in a movie. I never knew anything could smell or feel that bad. Honestly, jail was pretty chill. I got popped for simple weed possession, yay Texas. My cellmates were a friendly black man and a really old Indian man. Had some good convo. Bullshit about how dumb my charge was. I got bailed out like 8 hours later. Nothing crazy happened. I did have to poop in front of them though. That was awkward. 5/10 would not do again. Very small town jail for a weekend stay at 18 years old. Boring GGGG. Eat, sleep, get hassled from Barney Fife. They left the cell door open during the day. We had to mop the floor, hell maybe we volunteered, got to check out the library in the jail. No blanket party, no rape, no tats. Pretty easy time all told. Which I guess makes up for being arrested for second-degree burglary for stealing a mattress out of an unoccupied tent at a Girl Scout camp in the mountains. In all fairness, a tent is considered a dwelling, so yeah, I was a burglar. Yup, don't do the crime if you don't want the time or whatever. Been in a number of US jails. Food quality varies, but generally you'll be hungry from dinner till 6 p.m. till breakfast 6 a.m. Usually you can get some commissary items by trading desserts or playing poker if you're good at it. Most of my time is spent sleeping and reading books. Some people prefer TV and you often don't get to choose what's on. I've generally been in minimum security so haven't seen many fights, but I've been on cell blocks where someone's freaking out for over an hour, and this inevitably happens around midnight when you're trying to sleep. Mostly I've learned to keep my head down and do as the officers say. The beds suck, the food sucks, and you're inside at least 23 hours a day. 3/10 would not recommend. Smell-based punishments seem way more effective, since smell is the best memory trigger, and less inhumane than solitary from what I've heard of them. Interesting to hear some prisons catching on to it. A buddy of mine spent a year in prison once and he said that when a similar thing happened, I believe they concealed tobacco in the cell and got caught. A CO brought 5 jugs of rotten milk into the cell, popped off the lids, and walked out of the cell with the lids. He told them the jugs would be removed the next day, as long as they were still full, i.e., don't flush the milk down the toilet. The 4 guys in the cell apparently took shifts trying to keep a hand over the jugs to keep the smell from gagging them, but it was little use. He never participated in breaking prison rules again. Jail in Manhattan for one night. Exhausting process, took all night to get booked at the police station, put in a holding cell, transferred to the main jail. Room full of 25 guys, the metal benches were so full that people were sitting on the floor, no chance of sleeping. 1 toilet, I got yelled at for not flushing fast enough. 1 joker was keeping everyone entertained. Feel bad, he had just been celebrating with his friends in a park with a couple bottles of wine until police came to harass him, as NYC cops like to do. This was during the stop and frisk era. After 24 hours, was finally appointed a lawyer, transferred to a different cell, went to court, released. Court was pretty painless. Cops made up shit that I never said though. 1/5 stars, interesting experience, but I'm not interested in going back. Food was subpar too. I was kicked out of the house often as a teen, so I became friends with other kids with fucked up parents. Some of those friends had exceptionally fucked up parents, dad in triads, parents smoked crack etc. This is in Hong Kong, so they went to jail quite a lot, 2 of them still in there. They are triad members and got caught selling meth. From what I've heard, it depends what kind of prison you're in. In juvenile, for the more serious criminals, they had to work out for 6 hours a day in the yard. If they were too tired to continue, they would get kicked until they got up and continued the exercise. There was lots of social time though, which I think is a bad thing, cause my friend Junior told me he learned how to make a knife from newspaper pages by soaking it in water and pressing each page on top of each other. I think these friends just led him into more crime. One other friend went to minimum security prison. He said the prison was actually trying to rehabilitate people. Even though he had to stay in the cell more, they would get classes. He learned how to be a hairdresser in prison and now he's looking into doing that, so not all so bad. I asked all of them about dropping the soap. Nope, that's not a thing in prison, at least not prisons in Hong Kong. Jail is just boring and you mostly sleep all day or read whatever is available. Unfortunately mostly it's Bibles. Do lots of push-ups and sit-ups. Not that scary, but it is unpleasant. Like staying in the waiting room of the DMV for weeks. Food is bland and not much of it. You order some food from the commissary but it's super expensive. 2 for a ramen pack or something like that. Dollar store food priced at 10. I have misophonia so I couldn't stand the snoring and didn't have access to commissary so I couldn't get earplugs. I was freshly 18 and tried to sleep in our church after being locked out of my parents' place, ironically over religious differences, didn't want to serve a Mormon mission. The set of keys I had nabbed that I thought would get me into the church didn't work, outdated, and I just started walking to a friend's. A neighbor called it in and I was charged with attempted unlawful entry. I spent hours and hours in the shower, and didn't call anyone for bail because I was so messed up. I was nicknamed Waterboy. 5 days later somebody filed a missing persons report for me and my friend's parents bailed me out. The financial strain of being independent during the 2009 depression led to homelessness and some other unpleasantness, especially with all the fines and probation and rethinking class costs. I was able to get to college in 2012 after getting kinda back on my feet, but I feel like I never quite got over this time in my life. I've had multiple stays at county jails in TX. Every minute of it sucks. Having your freedom stripped from you is a terrible experience, even if you know you won't be in long. I visited my dad in prison when I was a kid and one thing that stuck with me from then to the time that I went to jail, was the smell. All jails, prisons seem to have the same funky ass boat mildew smell. In county jail the food is horrible and they give you just enough nutrients to survive. People think that everyone works out but it's hard to have energy or build muscle with the amount of food they give you. You have to be able to make commissary to get more food. Commissary is very necessary. In county it can be prohibitively expensive for a lot of people. Packs of ramen go for like $1 each. In state prison, they feed you more and commissary is cheaper. You can also get items not in county jail like sodas and ice cream. Depending on where you're at, you will most likely be grouped with offenders who have done similar level crimes. Meaning non-violent housed with non-violent offenders and vice versa. There are times this isn't true. Even though I was in on a non-violent driving offense, I was housed with people on trial for armed robbery, murder, attempted murder. I'm not sure why I was put in that tank. I don't have any history of violence. Maybe it's the way I look, IDK. One of the murderers was actually a really nice guy to me anyways, and I got along with him well. We discussed philosophy and played chess every day. Pedophiles do not get treated like social media or movies once you believe. They get put in ADSEG protective custody and are basically untouchable. I heard if you attack a pedophile in jail, you can be charged with a hate crime. I have not been able to verify the accuracy of this claim. You rarely see full sunlight or full darkness. There's always lights on. Fucking fluorescent lights, buzzing all the fucking time. It will drive you mad. Being sick in jail is terrible. Medical care is highly lacking. If you're sick they give you a couple Advil per day and that's it. Mental illnesses are rampant. Some people are on their meds and stable, others have conditions that are undiagnosed and untreated but clearly off their rocker. Pathological liars are everywhere. Everyone is innocent. Everyone is a big-time drug dealer. Everyone is a hard-as-fuck gangster. You get really tired of hearing people talk about all the money and shit they have out in the world but they're asking you for a shot of coffee because they don't have money on their books. Coffee, stamps and ramen works like currency. You can buy different things, services from other inmates. I used to draw, fill out paperwork, write letters and file motions for other dudes to help pass the time. Daytime TV is the most obnoxious shit ever and you will gain a newfound hatred for it in jail. Dudes will be gathered around the TV watching The View arguing over the dumbest shit. Gay shit happens but not like you see on TV. If you're a straight dude you might be shocked about what you see in the showers. In the showers, sandals are required. If you go barefoot in the shower you will end up with a fucked up foot infection. I once saw a dude coming off heroin lay down on the floor in the shower. I wanted to puke. There's years of caked on germs and calcified semen on those shower floors and walls. Rape is fairly uncommon, but chances are higher in jail than the free world. For the most part, nobody is trying to take your booty hole. Jailhouse snitchers and thieves are hated. If you get caught stealing, you better hope you can fight because you will get fucked up on sight over a couple packs of noodles. There's probably more but those are the main things I think people don't realize about jail. What is the greatest comeback to an insult you've ever heard? 18th-century British radical politician John Wilkes was told in Parliament by a political opponent, "Sir, I do not know whether you will die on the gallows or of the pox." Wilkes shot back with, "That depends, my lord, on whether I embrace your lordship's principles or your mistress." Wilkes shot back with, "That depends, my lord, on whether I embrace your lordship's principles or your mistress." The lords observed with snide delight. He glanced, ashamed, from left to right. He stood to make his own reply. "I know you are, but what am I?" During WW1, Switzerland had a tiny standing army, but they were very skilled marksmen. Wilhelm II of Germany asked what 250k Swiss troops would do if he decided to invade with 500k German troops. The Swiss said, "Shoot twice and go home." Saw a clip of a stand-up comedian the other day, and he says something along the lines of, "The first time I had sex it was terrible. The first time I had sex," and a woman chimes in with, "You mean yesterday?" Crowd laughs for a while, and while the comedian is waiting for them to calm down you can see the gears turn in his head. Once it gets down to basically a few chuckles, he just says, "Glad you remember," and the crowd just lost their shit. It was amazing, not heard, but read. Easily the Spartans reply to Philip II of Macedon. As Philip II of Macedon was conquering Greek city-states left and right, Sparta was left alone. Philip had achieved a crushing victory, and Sparta was relatively weak and without walls. Philip sent a message to the Spartans saying, "If I invade Laconia you will be destroyed, never to rise again." The Spartans replied with one word, "If." This is actually where the word laconic came from. Most ancient accounts make the Spartans sound like the masters of trash talk. The Persians also told them at one point their arrows would blot out the sun, and a Spartan replied that it'd be nice to fight in the shade. Also, it's a long repeated response, but when they were told to lay down their arms their response was, "Molon labe," which roughly translates to, "Come and take them." The Spartans were a slogan-making machine. Another famous one was, "E tan e epi taz," either with it or on it. It was said by a mother to her son, when giving him his shield before going to battle. It means return home with it, or on it dead. Dropping the shield was the ultimate act of cowardice. Ripsorspis, shield dropper, was the worst thing that you could ever be, a combination of coward and traitor. As a side note, the Greek army still uses the slogans. Edit, since this comment got some attention, here are some more interesting facts about the Spartans. They were good warriors, however they were terrible strategists. Their social system, based on a ruling caste of warriors exploiting a huge number of serfs and slaves, crippled their expansion potential, and they only had few colonies. They won the Peloponnesian War, only because of treason, and soon after they were eliminated from history, whereas loser Athens kept on being relevant. The Spartans were famous for not talking much. This was admired as a stance on life and immortalized in the quote, "To laconize anesti philosophy," i.e., to talk like a Spartan. Laconia, being the region, is to speak wisely. Modern Sparta is a small town in Greece. The people in the region still don't talk much and are extremely conservative, to use a euphemism. Most notable thing about modern Sparta is that it is the only city in Greece that doesn't have a single traffic light. One of the random generated missions you can get in AskReddit, Odyssey, is a Spartan mother who basically says her son dropped his shield, so go kill him. Whenever I get that mission, I'm like, harsh. Then I go kill the son and bring his dead body back to her. Didn't he wipe Sparta out eventually? Nope. They were left alone by the Macedonians. Interestingly, it was the Visigoths who eventually sacked Sparta. That feels like a clash of timelines, but Sparta had continued throughout Roman times. After it was conquered, Sparta became a popular tourist destination. It makes sense, but reading about stuff like this makes you really think about the fact that the civilizations we study today in history class also had history class in their schools. The Romans were perfectly aware of Greek and Egyptian history the same way we're aware of those things plus Roman history. It was an exchange between two co-workers a few years back, basically a slut-shaming gone wrong. Person A had only ever slept with one person, their previous boyfriend that they were still obsessed with. Person B was the opposite and would bang a different person every week. Person A, "I can't believe how many people you've slept with. I don't understand how people can have sex with someone they aren't in love with." Person B, "Well, your ex-boyfriend seemed to manage it okay." Person A, silence as he dies inside, "What are you looking at?" "I'm still trying to find out." Quiet guy in my art class got called queer bait. He replied with, "If I'm the bait then you're the catch of the day." My 10-year-old cousin was pushed aside by an older student at school who also felt the need to call him a gay child. My cousin told him not to get his hopes up. You wish became the kryptonite to gay jokes in my elementary school for a while growing up. Do your parents know you're gay? My first exposure to a trick question. Do yours? Yes, my parents know you are gay. Bravo. Do they know you don't know how to wipe your ass right? Or do I need to tell them? Left to right, obviously. On a construction site one afternoon, different trades were working in the same area. Like silly team sports, the Sparkies always hang with the Sparkies and the Turd Wranglers always hang with the Turd Wranglers, and anytime they're together it turns into a pointless dick measuring contest, usually not literally. One particularly childish exchange saw two men chopping back and forth, my dick biggest, blah blah blah. Finally one of them spits out this classic, I've got girth like a can of corn, and the clap back was unforgettable, but you've got length like a can of tuna. Everyone busted up. Mr. Girth tried to hide his embarrassment, but was tied up. No comeback. And a room of men laughing uncontrollably. Good times. My grandma asked my cousin, who'd had lots of partners and 2 kids at this point, if she was ever going to get married. Cousin, it's not the same nowadays. We don't buy cars without test driving them first. Grandma, yeah, but they don't let you put 100,000 miles on them either. Point goes to Granny. One of my co-workers was cold calling customers, trying to get appointments to drum up business. One of them told him to go fuck his hand, and he responded with, I've got that penciled in for 3. I should be done by 4 if you'd like to come in for an appointment then. The guy laughed his ass off, and ended up coming in for the appointment. I had a co-worker, also in sales, also cold calling, a take no shit middle-aged woman. When people hung up on us, sometimes we'd call back and play dumb, often people would realize they were being rude. This is more business to business. Anyhow, this lady couldn't help herself, so she'd call back, feign the same polite friendliness, and say, hey sorry, I think we were rudely disconnected. In high school, we congregated in our cliques around the benches. One friend is cracking his knuckles and did this fairly often. Another friend saw this and remarked, you pop your hands a lot, you must jerk off a lot. The friend that popped his hands immediately looks at him and calmly says, you pop your jaw a lot, you must suck dick a lot. Weirdly enough no one laughed, we just all shrugged and took it as a logical explanation. It's been over 20 years and I still think about the logic. Edit. Wow, look at those numbers, thanks internet fam. As for the informative comments about changing cliques to cliques, for the sake of the story I think I'll leave it as is. Glenn McGrath, Aussie cricketer, got frustrated with Ed O'Brands as his every attempt to stump Brands failed. This is what happened next. McGrath, why are you so fat? Brands, because every time I fuck your wife, she gives me a biscuit. My grandma got into a fight at the grocery store with a guy who told my 9-year-old brother to move the fuck out of the way. They were going at it and his final words were, suck my dick, bitch, she said across the store, if I could find it, bitch. Winston Churchill, of course. Lady Nancy Astor, Winston, if you were my husband, I'd poison your tea. Churchill, Nancy, if I were your husband, I'd drink it. Winston, you are drunk, disgustingly drunk, yes, madam, but you're fat. And when morning comes, I shall be sober. I work at a hotel. A few years ago this guest got into a spat with our security officer over something, but she wasn't getting whatever she wanted, so she told him he was full of S______. Our security officer replied immediately, no I'm not, I took care of that this morning. But thank you for your concern for my good health and regularity. At this time I was about to bust up laughing, so I had to excuse myself to the back office, and as I was leaving I heard him continuing on with this lady, deadpan, but I promise I eat a healthy diet full of fiber. It warms my heart to know you're concerned with me having regular bowel movements. So the next time I'm constipated I know you're thinking of me. It continued on, and all the more he's playing this deadpan and it's making the lady madder and madder, and I'm in the back laughing so hard I'm nearly crying. After that spiel was over though, she didn't give us any more problems the rest of the night. A friend of mine was getting bitched at by these 2 identical twin girls in a class one had once. He replied with a troubling look on his face and said, if you 2 are identical, how come only one of you are hot? That dude played the long game as those 2 girls looked rather perplexed for the rest of the session. I can't remember the best one I've heard, but I can remember the best comeback I ever did. It is also, in fact, the only good comeback I ever did. I was in 7th grade, and we were in the locker room after gym. People were discussing shoe sizes because this one kid had enormous feet. I don't know if I have small feet, but mine were the smallest. They said, small feet, you know what that means. I didn't mind too much, but one kid crossed the line. He said, don't worry, fella, there's like 10 different ways to make it bigger. So I said, have you tried all 10? Not very impressive, but it shut him up. I was the one insulted, but not the one with the comeback. I was out with a coworker and her friends, and my buddy and I were leaving a little too early for her sensibilities. She jokingly got up in my face and said, smell that. Smells like pussy. A guy playing at the pool table next to us stepped forward and said, I'm sorry, that must be me. I just ate. It was amazing. I was 13 years old, carrying a bunch of books for the teacher. Some joker thought it was funny to pretend to fall right in front of me. I told him, don't fall for me, man. My whole book carrying crew and his prank crew all started bursting into laughter. I didn't register what had happened until much later. When I was in high school, I had an ancient history class with a teacher named Mr. O'Neill. He was a really educated and well-spoken but quiet, younger guy, a bit chubby with curly blonde hair, and liked wearing bow ties. In this same class was this kid named Jake, who was one of those kids that always acted like a smartass to every teacher in order to try and get a laugh. He was so annoying he actually had a stapler thrown at his direction by another teacher, which is a whole other story I told the other day. Anyway, I remember one day Mr. O'Neill was having trouble reaching the string to pull down the screen for the projector. He would make little jumps and swat at the string, but just barely couldn't get it. Jake noticed and saw an opportunity, so he yelled out, "What's the matter, Mr. O'Neill, can't reach?" Him and his buddies chuckled to themselves like a bunch of goons in the corner. Mr. O'Neill replied, "No, Jake. I'm just getting my morning exercise." And then he started touching his toes. It wasn't the most clever comeback, but coming from a guy like Mr. O'Neill, it was pretty hilarious. More importantly, it shut Jake up and a majority of the class started laughing at him. Mr. O'Neill became a bit of a hero for being the guy to shut down one of the annoying smart-ass kids that would always disrupt class. I have a bunch, but one of the more memorable ones was back in 8th grade. For context, I didn't make the basketball team 7th grade, but I made the team in 8th grade. This kid that was on the team the previous year but didn't make it currently was really upset and telling me how bad I am and blah blah blah. I told him that if he is better than me, then why didn't he make the team, and he replied with, "It's just cause of my grades, bro." So I replied with, "Oh, so you're just fucking stupid then." He gave up cause it was either accept that he was bad or accept he was an idiot, so